Good morning, everybody, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is David Okun. I've been speaking about the cost of living for the last 10 years, 10 months on this channel. My channel was created in 2012, and this program started in last year in 2022 in December. And we are 10 months and going to 1 year now. We are making progress. We have been slow. Thank you everyone who have been subscribing to my channel and helping me constantly, participating in various ways, sharing, clicking notification bell, and leaving a comment below, and also sharing my video with family and friends, and most importantly watching my video and valuing it. And if you think there is something good about it, let me know. If you think there is something needing improving, let me know. We are talking about the cost of living crisis. This program has taken a new and a broader, wider dimension beyond help from their respective governments across the globe, in Africa, in Europe, in different parts of the world. And my intention initially beginning to speak about the cost of living was to talk about the various support in the United Kingdom, but that I will go back to doing perhaps maybe next year, early next year. But this year my plan is to continue examining the policy perspective and also perhaps the legal aspect of the cultural aspect, so to speak, of the cost of living crisis. I've argued, in my opinion, I've actually argued successfully in favor of examining the cultural economy, as I have named it, and also the developmental economy. We have done very well in the form of development as a progress, as a format of progress, and we have also done very well in the other areas, including within the development frameworks. We've done very well on the fields of technology, science, engineering, research, and most importantly perhaps with capitalism and the market economic system, along with the political system of democracy, such as seen in the Western world and now being embraced across the globe. We have succeeded in creating what I would describe as excessive amount of wealth, growth, and the dynamic economy. And the Western world, the modern developed world is strong, and technology is the future, especially the internet and the social media, not least the YouTube. And it is trending, and it is the way of the future. And I celebrate along with other YouTubers what they are doing in their communities across the globe. Currently I'm talking about Africa. And in terms of the cost of living, this is a crisis created when capitalism became extreme, such as to disallow governments intervening effectively in periods of crisis, events such as war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and China. Today, I've been hearing intense war in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas and Palestinian. I don't know how long that is going to last. The failure to observe culture, human culture, in my opinion, is responsible for this extremism within the ruling class, in government, within the state, along the sectors such as the economy, the military, security. And I believe this can change in favor of peace processes and roadmap to peace and peace processes, when we learn our culture and then we start all over again, merely to learn our culture, and in so doing, accessing the estate of processing our systems where we begin to learn how to respect ourselves and also how to respect other people, how to respect our communities, how to respect, the elderly. I mean, how to respect everything in society, within development, within the cultural systems. It is about respect. It's about respecting science, learning, respecting our time with family and friends. Respecting our projects, the tasks we set, the research we do, and looking at the environment, the environmental issues, and looking at our wealth, an holistic approach to development and progress. And this is something I've been trying to establish while talking about the cost of living as a crisis. Believe is a failure of culture when those in power fail to support the cultural system of society, and the closure of the public sector in Africa and in the developed world has been a source of immense cataclysm, and we have suffered many things in the hands of the authority. And the cost of living is a classic example. It's a crisis. It's a failure of the state to intervene within the public sector to provide public service effectively. The closure, as it is continuing, as it will happen, ultimately the closure of the public sector will result in the closure, the end of public service. And when public service ends, the result will be things like the cost of living crisis. The cost of living crisis is evidence of poverty. Poverty is when you work for a living and as of necessity, and we have seen it in evidence that people who work for a living are actually forming in excess of 90% of the population. The few under capitalism and the marketized system of the economy are actually concentrating wealth in the hands of a few, and these few individuals are extremely rich, men and women, including Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Elon Musk of Tesla, and maybe and X I think is better known by the phenomenon of X, and people like Bill Gates and his wife. People like Donald Trump of America, former US president. There are so many multi-billionaires and multi-millionaires within the political, entrepreneurial, the entertainment, and also there are YouTubers who are, I think, maybe multi-billionaires also, I don't know. But certainly I think there are some YouTubers who are multi-millionaires, certainly. But there's nothing wrong with millionaires and billionaires, except that they need to learn culture in the sense that humanity needs to be prioritized in everything we do. Our wealth is important, environment is important, nature is important, politics is important, but culture is more important because it focuses on humanity as a priority. And if there is a focusing on humanity happening, then what happens in the end is we begin to respect and value humanity. We begin to garner our resources, our human resources, and so doing to actually gather our strength, form our communion, and support our communities and villages, families, and we begin to focus on things which make us strong as a united front, and also accessing wealth, power, information, technology, engineering. Technology being the future of humanity, and things can always look better when we begin to work with people, respecting people, valuing people. Life is about humanity and wealth and nature and knowledge. Everything is actually there to support humanity, and that is what I've been trying to talk about over and over, and repeating the same point in different ways. So today, right now, we are going to look at the politics of Africa. There are, as you would expect, so many political parties in Africa, and they are listed in various sources. And we will talk about African Union. African Union is the umbrella of African polity, and is actually African Union is actually an African country in the making. So under the globalization agenda, African Union is going to be the country of Africa in the first instance. They may not call it the country of Africa, but certainly that is the purpose, is to bring Africa together as a federation. And my prediction with the African Union, we are going to have one currency. We are going to have hopefully one language, maybe Swahili or some other languages in Africa, but certainly English and French probably, and one more or two other European languages will be working in Africa. And the currency as well, I suspect the dollar, the euro, and perhaps I'm not predicting the pound, the British pound. I think the dollar is going to take over the global currency, and probably the euro dollar or the euro itself. And we wait and see, because globalization involves African Union, but in more importantly, it actually involves the European Union and also other unions, which are actually probably going to involve the eastern, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world. But ultimately, the globe is going to be one country. Under the project of globalization, people will be, in my opinion, probably be speaking English, and we will wait and see if we are still alive, because the process is ongoing. Is almost complete. Globalization is almost complete, and we have been talking previously about sovereignty. And speaking of sovereignty is almost like speaking in history, because globalization means, and also African Union, African Unionism, if you want that. It means giving up your national sovereignty as nation states. There are about 54 countries in Africa, and these will actually congregate to form a country of Africa. Meaning Africa now, maybe in East Africa we have East African Union, and probably West African equivalents of that, and also Central and probably South Africa. And ultimately we are going to have African Union, the European Union, and other unions, and ultimately we are going to have global union or something similar to that. And it is exciting. The world is enough. The world should have been better, but I have stated very clearly that people with power in government, like head of states, wherever they are, should now concentrate on getting the rest of the world out of poverty. It is not necessary. The people of Africa are actually are suffering the cost of living. And I mean, the one good thing about Africans is they're just resilient. Otherwise, Africa is threatened extinction. The level of suffering in Africa is unspeakable, and it is wrong for leaders in Africa. It is wrong for leaders around the world to leave Africa at the device of what is cruelty, what is actually a form of violence. You have seen the product of violence and nastiness in Israel as they fight. I don't know where the fighting is going to go. I think a lot of people are going to die in the Middle East, in Israel, and also in Gaza, in Palestine, and that is not good. It's evidence of human immaturity, because we shouldn't be fighting in this day and age. let's go back to talking about Africa. I'm looking through material here, and the regions of the African Union. You've got the northern region, the southern region. You got the Eastern Europe region, the Eastern Europe, the Eastern region, the Western Euro regions A and B, and the Central region. I repeat that the North, got the North, the South, and the Eastern region, the Western region is divided into A and B. God bless West Africa, and you got the Central region. So you got actually I would say about 5 regions, and this continental demarcation, as you find with the regions of African Union, actually divide the continent into 5 different components: the north, south, east, west, and central. The African Union AU is a continental union consisting of 55 member states. The United Union, the union was formed with Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as its headquarters on the 26th June 2001. The union was officially established on the 9th July 2002 as a successor of the Organization of African Union Unity, OAU. In July 2004, the African Union's Pan-African Parliament, PAP, was relocated to Madrid, to Midrand in South Africa, but the African Commission on Human and People's Rights remained in Addis Ababa. The African Union, not to be confused with the AU, AU Commission is formed by the Constitutive Act of the African Union, which aims to transform the African Economic Community, Federated Commonwealth, into a state under established international conventions. The convention is part of the constitution of the world. The constitution is actually constitution in its own merit, but under the constitution you have the law and the convention. These are actually the governing and also the ruling framework of society. And therefore the African Union as a parliamentary government known as the African Union government, consisting of legislative, judicial, and executive organs. These are actually the classical component of the state. You have a parliament, which is actually where the laws are made, and you have the executive component, which is actually the governing implementation, and you have the judiciary, which is actually the component of the courts of laws and its adjudication. And that is what you find an equivalence replicated from nation states into what is now an African state potentially. So what do we say? A person becomes an AU president by being elected to the PAP and subsequently gaining majority support in the PAP. The powers and authorities of the President of the African Parliament derive from the Consultative Act and the Protocol of the Pan-African Parliament, as well as the inheritance of the presidential authority stipulated by the African Treaty and by the international treaty, including those subordinating the Secretary General of the OAU Secretariat, AU Commission, the PAP. When you talk about commission in the federated environment, you talk about the institution with the governing infrastructure. And so this is an equivalent of the executive branch, but more than that, it encompasses executive function, but sometimes also legislative function and probably the judicial function. That's the nature of commissioning, the commissions, commissioning system. And extensive human rights abuses still occur in several parts of Africa. often under the oversight of the state. Most of such violations occur for political reasons, often as a side effect of civil war. Personally, I think still the fundamental problem with Africa is poverty, and because these African leaders, including politicians, of course, and also those at the high level of doing businesses, cling to power because wealth is in the power. If you are at the age of state, you become a millionaire almost in US dollar almost overnight, and it is a lot of incentive for people to cling into power. But also, this mentality is everywhere in the world, except they express themselves differently in different countries. And in Europe, for example, people, even if they leave power, political power, they just gain economic power elsewhere, maintaining their wealth. Wealth is the driver of power and influence, and that's why wealth is now at the heart of discussion. It is actually the fuel and the strength of progress at the developmental level. And that's why I'm talking about the cost of living. The cost of living is about poverty, and to solve the cost of living crisis, you need as a government, the public and private government within politics and businesses in the corporate corporate empires of the business sector. They should work together because they're the ones with wealth and power. They should work together and design a policy of helping those who are trapped in poverty across the globe. The 95% of the population who work for a living, they need to get out of poverty to solve such crises as the cost of living. I've been saying this over again and will continue to repeat them. Most of such violations occur within the political for political reasons, and countries where a major human rights violations have been reported in recent times include the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Ivory Coast. Boundary conflicts, and we're looking at the Berlin Conference of the 1884-1885 and the least conflict in Africa. This section is an excerpt from military history of Africa post-colonial. African states have made great efforts to respect in interstate borders as inviolate for a long time. For example, the Organization of African Unity (OAU), which was established in 1963 and replaced by the African Union in 2002, set the respect for the territorial integrity of each state as one of its principles in the OAU Charter. Indeed, compared with the formation of the European state, there have been fewer interstate conflicts in Africa for changing the borders, which has influenced the state formation there and has enabled some states to survive that might have been defeated and absorbed by the others. Yet interstate conflicts are played out by support for proxy armies or rebel movements. Many states have experienced civil war, including Rwanda, Sudan, Angola, Sierra Leone, Congo, Liberia, and Ethiopia and Somalia. The reason Africa are fighting, because like fighting in the Middle East, like fighting in Ukraine, fighting in America, in America and the Middle East. Many times people fight in different ways using militarism or economic tools or other factors, environmental, weaponry, and all the other formats of weaponry, biological weaponry. Wherever people choose to fight, or even propaganda, warfare, we fight because we are culturally less educated than we realize, and like I said, we now need to make sure we start learning to put humanity first because warfare have actually hindered our progress. We are looking to live in harmony and achieve peace and happiness, because without peace and there is always no peace for the wicked, and as long as there is no peace, we cannot rest, and if we cannot rest, we cannot achieve happiness, which is the ultimate goal of humanity. Some people call happiness joy. Let us look at the economy of Africa, the economy of Africa, the list of African countries by GDP nominal, and list of African countries by GDP PPP. On the economy of African Union also, and now I can see Africa in terms of its political and economic and other aspects of infrastructure. Continental infrastructure is actually referenced in terms of the African Union, and that is quite interesting. We talking about the map of the African Economic Community, AEC, CEN, CEN, SAD, COMESA, CEN. I think it refers to Central Africa. COMESA is in West Africa. EAC, East African Community. ECCAS. We have ECOWAS. We have IGAD. We have SADC and UMA. These are actually the key institutions of the states, which actually underlines the economic infrastructuring in Africa. And although it has abundant natural resources, Africa remains the world's poorest and least developed continent, other than Antarctica, the result of a variety of causes that may include corrupt governments that have often committed serious human rights violations, failed central planning, high levels of literacy, low self-esteem, lack of access to foreign capital, legacies of colonialism, the slave trade, and the Cold War, the frequent tribal and military conflict ranging from guerrilla warfare to genocide. So we look at Africa in different dimensions in interpreting our information, and especially in terms of the cost of living, bearing in mind that the cost of living is a condition of poverty. It evidences the prevalence of poverty among the ordinary citizens of the world, the 95% who work for living across the globe. And this is a poor indictment on society, and we need a working of how we learn, how we process information, how we apply resources, how we address the issues of security, food security, energy security, physical, national, all elements of society need to be re-examined and actually recalibrated in terms of cultural economy, which actually put humanity at the very top of our global agenda. Its total nominal GDP remains behind that of the United States, China, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, India, and France. According to the United Nations Human Development Report in 2003, the bottom 24 ranked nations, 151st to the 175th, were all African. Africa is in Africa extremely the poorest, poverty, literacy, malnutrition, and inadequate water supply and sanitation, as well as poor health, affect a large proportion of the people who reside in the African continent. In August 2008, the World Bank announced a revised global poverty estimate based on a new international poverty line of 1.25% per day versus the previous measure of £1. In other words, Africans on average actually worth on average $1, $1 US. 81% of the sub-Saharan African population was living on less than $2.50 per person per day in 2005, compared with 86% for India. Sub-Saharan Africa is the least successful region of the world in reducing poverty. $1.25 per day. Some 50% of the population living in poverty in 1981, 200 million people. I figure that rose to 58% in 1996, before dropping 50% in 2005, 208 million people. The average poor person in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to live on only 7% a day, and was poorer in 2003 than in 1973, indicating increasing poverty in some areas. The effect of capitalism is making the rich richer, the poor poorer. African Asian states are some of the richest millionaires, and maybe some of them are even billionaires in US dollars. And all because they are in power, power corrupt, absolute power corrupt, absolutely. I'm not really insinuating anything on any one particular person, but the trend of capitalism across the globe is such as to give excessive power via wealth and other aspects of power in the hands of the few at the expense of the many, often the 90 to 95% of the population who work for living, the lower and the middle class of the world. Unfortunately, due to educational laxity, a lot of people actually do not realize that they are poor until there is a crisis such as the cost of living crisis. And a lot of people are borrowing money. The credit economy is a very strange animal or instrument of wealth. A lot of people feel wealthy when they are actually borrowing money for everything, including food, energy, including borrowing money for housing, and in the developed world in particular, houses are so expensive that people cannot really necessarily buy food. And people can buy food, but people cannot buy houses. Even energy is paid for normally every week or every month. So if you are to pay for, if you need to buy energy, you will go bankrupt very quickly. I mean, some things are not made for sale, and like I said elsewhere, I mean, a good reform will actually consider providing food, energy, and water free of charge, and will consider also possibility of providing housing in Africa almost for everyone. There's enough wealth to do that, and also in the developed world, houses can be built and given free of charge for people who earn less than $100,000 per annum. And that is being done, not really giving housing, but in a country like Uganda, I understand members of parliament are being given $100,000 to buy vehicles. This is a good thing, and it is good for the members of parliament, it's good for the countries. But African governments are actually bankrupt, being supported almost exclusively by the European governments. And this European government, along with America and the rest of the developed world, should actually give money to African government to ring-fence it, in addition to fighting corruption. First place, which is actually corruption in Africa is a leading evidence of failed cultural economy. People really have lost track of humanity and the values coming with humanity, and this calls for urgent action involving educating the nations about the value of humanity. People increasingly treating fellow human as strangers, and this cannot be allowed. Is violent. Is the causes, the fundamental causes of violence and warfare and ending warfare. If we don't address the cultural issue, the valuing, the prioritizing humanity and the valuing of humanity, we are going to get into some serious trouble very quickly if we are no longer in trouble now. And we are going to be in serious trouble. Some of it is attributed to successful economic liberalization programs as spearheaded by foreign companies and governments, but other studies are cited but domestic government policies more than external factors. Capitalism is responsible for poverty, and that shouldn't have been the case if those in power, those in government were culturally educated, prioritizing humanity in every policy, public policy in particular, and the privatizing of the economy in what they call economic liberalization programs. This is actually the privatization which actually sells the country entirely into the hands of the few multimillionaires and multi-billionaires who own them piecemeal. And when they talk of liberalization, you think they talk about something very fanciful, but they talk about privatization. They don't want to talk about privatization. They are short of all the public sector, hospitals, schools, healthcare, the housing system, the transport system. All these things should be nationalized. Even the food companies actually have been sold. The energy companies have been sold off. So you buy now food in the market. You buy food in energy from private companies, electricity, and stuff like that. So these utilities actually, and all these sources of security, like food security, healthcare, should be nationalized. If there is any reform, it should be the other way around. Companies should be nationalized, provide a public service. In other words, companies responsible for providing essentials such as food, energy, water should be nationalized. But the people in power are doing the exact opposite. They are privatizing these services, and when these things are privatized and the government gives money to these companies and they waste the money, public money, and that's why they can no longer provide public services. Private companies can no longer provide because the private companies are not really designed to provide public service at all. They are there to make money. Ask any businessman or woman, what did you open your business for? To make money, to make profit, or to do something they want to get rich, and that is a good thing. Except the government confusing the economy, selling of the economy to provide basic necessities like food and energy, and that is a basic mistake. They should have done that, and they should have kept part of this section of the economy. They would have actually developed technology to develop and to deliver public service by public sector, and this should actually be reversed to solve the problem of the cost of living crisis and other problems which are looming, including in many ways wars, terrorism, and all these things. And if those in power stop their ears and refuse to listen, then they are going to create a lot of problems for people in the world. And people need to start to understand these policies and this situation. That's why I'm talking about them. Hopefully, what I haven't said, I'll say it again. I appreciate people who have been supporting me watching this video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. And we have been fluctuating. Sometimes we are high, sometimes we are low, but that is okay. And if you're watching this video up to now, appreciate it. Share it with your family and friends. Continue supporting it. And thank you so much. about 10 years after the HIPC resulted in what was that? The last debt crisis in 2005 was resolved with the help from the heavily indebted poor countries scheme HIPC. Now, heavily indebted poor countries scheme is a good thing, but that is actually a rubber stamp. It is actually dealing with the symptom. What the global governments, especially the developed countries like the European Union, the IMF, and the World Bank, the Americas, the United States of America, Canada, Brazil, all these big countries, in the East and in the West, in the Middle East, they should all come together to agree to renationalize the public sector. That is the solution, and financing, and use technology to enhance management and delivery within the public sector, providing public service, healthcare, food, energy, education, research, engineering. All these factors should be nationalized. The private sector has no business doing that. The private sector should be left to provide luxury goods and services to the super rich, multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. When I talk about poverty and its reduction, I'm only talking about getting the rest of the world out of poverty, the majority of the population, who are actually sinking deeper and deeper now into poverty, and that cannot allow to be happening. It needs to change. The HIPC resulted in some positive and negative effects on the economy in Africa. It did not work. About 10 years after the 2005 debt crisis in sub-Saharan Africa was resolved, Zambia fell back into debt. So that policy is actually a diversionary policy from the problem. The problem is privatization for the public sector. Provide public services. That the solution is actually nationalized, a publicly based organization. Because you see, the thing with private companies, if you sell off the public companies to them to provide public sector, public service, they close it down. The moment you don't make profit, because public services are not designed to make profit, because you are providing this to poor people. Poor people do not have money to spend on rich organizations, especially big corporations, which is now the ones running global economy, corporate companies like big banks and airlines. These people do not deal with poor people. Because poor people in the end don't have money. The only reason poor people still have money now is because of unemployment. And employment is being removed by technology. Technology is going to take over employment, and people are going to be without money entirely, and they will have no business to do with private companies. Therefore, these companies should be nationalized to provide food, energy, housing, healthcare, and schools to the poor majority who are actually living in poverty now. That will immediately, actually, even now, if it is done, will live almost everyone around the world. Actually, the cost of living will begin to stop. Will begin to stop immediately. Now, there is a lot of instability involving the private sector because it operates. It's so sensitive to crisis. Like we saw when every time there's war, there is actually a turbulence within the market. So the market should be left to run a very limited aspect of the economy. Things like luxury cars, limousine, luxury hospital for the super rich. There should be two types of economy. The private should focus on the multi-millionaires and the multi-billionaires, and the market to do with the public sector should concentrate on poor who should be getting things for free or at a much reduced price, but with high quality, and this should be provided by the public sector, accounted for by politicians and the civil service system. That is the solution. A small reason was due to the fall in copper prices in 2011, but the bigger reason was that a large amount of the money Zambia borrowed was wasted on or pocketed by the elite. Corruption is a major problem in Africa, but privatization of public service is the major problem. And it doesn't matter how analysts, these analysts, it doesn't matter what they say, either they don't know what they talk about or they just being corrupt. From 1995 to 2005, Africa's rate of economic growth increased, averaging 5% in 2005. Africa at some point was actually at a very high rate of growth, but the money goes into the hand of the few and not the many. Mainly military dictatorship leaders or political dictatorship leaders in Africa and around the world. They share the money, they don't even give the money to anyone, because the only way to give wealth to people is actually through public services managed by public sector. Some countries experience still a higher growth rate, notably Angola, Sudan, and Equatorial Guinea. If you go to Sudan now, you'll be shocked at the amount of debt or poverty among the majority of people. And all these countries being listed, actually, there are two worlds: the world with extreme wealth and for the few, and another world for the extreme poverty for the many, all of which have recently begun extracting their petroleum reserves or had expanded their oil extraction capacity. Oil is a source of death and tragedy in many parts of the world, including in Africa, because of money and wealth. People are so uneducated culturally, so that people can kill and destroy in the quest for power and money and wealth. In a recently published analysis based on world values survey data, the Australian political scientist Arnold Tush maintained that the several African countries, most notably Ghana, perform quite well on scale of mass support, democracy, and market economy. The globe under capitalism operate perfectly, almost perfectly well in terms of development, things like technology, engineering, creation of wealth, growth. What actually lacks is the cultural component of progress in terms of welfare, which should be provided by the public sector. So we're looking at our countries by rank in Africa. The GDP in millions of US dollar, the peak years, African Union. I'm not going to go through this, but let's say 2.9, African Union 2.9, almost 3 million, 3 billion probably. I'm not going to go through this. This is information is contained on table. It actually encompasses African Union, Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, Ethiopia, Angola, Morocco, Kenya, Libya, Tanzania, and African Union, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, Ethiopia, Morocco, Kenya, Angola, Ghana, Tanzania. All this information you can get it on YouTube. Tush global value comparison based on the World Value Survey derived the following factor analytical scales: 1 and the non-violent and the law-abiding society, democracy movement, a climate of personal non-violence, trust in institution, happiness, good health, no redistributive religious fundamentalism, accepting the market, feminism, involvement in politics, optimism and engagement, no welfare mentality, acceptance of the Calvinist work ethics, and spread in the performance of African countries with complete data. Tush concluded is really amazing. While one should be especially hopeful about the development of future democracy and the market economic economy in Ghana, the article suggests a pessimistic tendency for Egypt and Algeria, and especially for Africa's leading economy, South Africa. The human inequality, is measured by the UNDP's Human Development Report Index of Humanity Inequality, further impairs the development of human security. Tosh also maintained that the certain recent optimism corresponding to the economic and human rights data emerging from Africa is reflected in the development of the civil society. They may be talking about this information, but if you read between the lines, the only thing they're talking about is they're talking about economic reform, which is privatization, which is actually right. For when we assign private businesses, especially big corporations, to develop and maintain the economy for the few who are multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. This type of the economy should be the private and the corporate elements of the economy. The other side, which involve welfare, should actually be on things like food, energy, schools, health, education, other issues like environment. These should be left to the government. It is a very straightforward proposition, and it doesn't matter how complicated think tanks or even policy advisors would like to make this matter complicated. It will fail because the matter is simplified, and the public service should be provided by public sector for the poor many, and not for the many, for the few. People talk about work, but work is provided by the few to the many. Work under slavery, under capitalism, represents a form of slavery. If you work for somebody else, you are their slave. And if you are small and medium business in a modern economy, you are also a slave of the big bosses, the corporate empires. And so the concept of work should stop. It doesn't take people out of poverty at all. It's a form of insanity for think tanks and policy advisors to even open their mouth to talk about work. And as I speak now, technology is set to take away work anyway, and to free even the people who are under the serfdom after the slavery of the super rich. Super rich do not work for living because they just sit there and talk and boast over people who work as slaves and who are not paid even anything. Workers are not paid anything. Whatever little they earn after tax are actually taxed again when they pay for food in the supermarket, buy food, pay rent, put fuel in the car, or even rent car, pay debts, which they are borrowed, credit card, maybe mortgages on their homes. So, there is no peace for the wicked. By default, people who work for living are acting slaves and are treated as people who are wicked, who are not entitled to peace. And that's why we should keep quiet when we talk about work. Work do not pay. In terms of lifting people out of poverty, we have seen it with the cost of living crisis here in the UK and in other parts of the world. People are so poor because now some banks which used to give credit are now withdrawing credit support, and people are now being left to dry. And the government is closing down the public sector and leaving the nations of the world to dry. There is no sense of care for anyone. That's why I say we are, as a matter of emergency, we need to revisit our culture and prioritize humanity over everything else. Otherwise, we are going to see an explosion of violence and extinction threats, and beginning from the very poor the moderately poor, and this will face extinction. And also, the super rich are actually going to go extinct because violence knows no boundaries. Democratic Republic of the Congo (DRC) has 70% of the world's coltan, the mineral used in the production of tantalum capacitors for electric devices such as the cell phone. So cell phone is actually mobile phone. Without the Congo, a mobile phone will not exist in the world. So that's why there are a lot of war in Congo now. These war are actually orchestrated by the developed world in Europe, in Asia, in America, in the Middle East, developed world, such as Israel and Arab world. They are all going to Africa to steal wealth, minerals. The Congo has always been very violent. It has a large amount of fresh water. I think the River Congo, and also Equator passes through the Congo, and outside is one of the wealthiest areas of the world. And Kenya, Uganda, and the Congo and northern Brazil are actually, these are petroleum belts with tropical forests, such as seen in the Congo Basin, and these are actually wealth, natural resources. Africa should not be even suffering the cost of living at all. And so, because of corruption and violence, especially by the developed world, bullying Africa into stupidity, the DRC also has more than 30% of the world's diamond reserve. It's a ticking time bomb to have wealth without power. Guinea is the world's largest exporter of bauxite. As the growth in Africa has been driven mainly by services and not manufacturing for our agriculture, it has been growth without jobs and without a reduction in poverty level. That's what I've just been saying, because you see, Africa cannot provide services before lifting Africans out of poverty. Production of agriculture and manufacturing is the mainstay of every country, including even in the West. Because in the West, that's what's happening now. We are relying on the service sector. We don't build anything. We don't produce anything. We instead begin to talk nonsense about environmental protection. And if you see the way those in power behave in Africa and the rest of the world, you think it is a deliberate policy to choke people to death by poverty. And you see the level of poverty in Africa, you will be left in no doubt that it's a conspiracy within the ruling class to destroy the majority of the population in Africa and across the globe. In recent years, the People's Republic of China has built increasingly stronger ties with African nations and is Africa's largest trading partner. In 2007, Chinese companies invested a total of $1 billion in Africa. A Harvard University study led by Professor Callistus Juma showed that Africa could feed itself by making the transition from importer to self-sufficiency. That is stating the obvious, and there's no reason for that not to happen, but the government has to manage it for the many and not for the few. The few can be, can do production for the super rich. The super rich can have the best of both worlds. Enjoying the product of privatization and also nationalization. African agriculture is at the crossroads. We have come to the end of the century of policies that favored Africa's export of raw materials and importation of food. Africa is starting to focus on agricultural innovation as its new engine for regional trade and prosperity. The next time we meet, we are going to talk about demographics. And thank you for watching this video. And we have been talking about Africa. We have been looking at issues of development, politics, and governance, security, or in its various shapes. We continue to talk in reference to our speaking to the cost of living crisis as it happens now, We need to nationalize the rest of the economy to do with food, energy, production, and probably medicine. Everything needed by the majority, the 95% of the population who work for a living, should be managed by the government directly under the national business system, and as part of the modern market, as part of capitalism. And that is going to, in terms of development, is going to be open doors for stability and development in favor of the many and not the few. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel if you watch this far. You are definitely a champion, and see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye bye.